you're watching AnewZ. I'm Nadia Johnny. Here are your top stories. The Israeli military told Palestinians in Gaza City to leave for the south. Trump says he is very disappointed that India has been buying oil from Russia. And the European Commission has fined Google almost €3 billion for breaching EU antitrust rules. Israeli forces has ordered residents of Gaza City to evacuate as troops press deeper into the city. The Israel Defense Forces say civilians should head to Al-Mawasi, a designated humanitarian zone in the southern city of Khan Yunis. Military spokesperson Avichai Ardrey said on social media that the area offers food, tents and medical supplies. He urged residents to move early and join the thousands who have already relocated in recent days. Staying on Gaza, and even though Israel has issued these orders, many residents say they have nowhere safe to go.
Israeli forces continue operations in Gaza City after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the capture of the city, calling it a Hamas stronghold that must fall to defeat the militants. But the operation threatens to displace hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, many of whom had already fled earlier in the war.
In regard to the leaflets that were dropped, they want us to displace. Why would we do that? There are bombardments everywhere. We cannot leave. That's it. We will die here. We are not leaving. We are tired.
Others say they have moved from city to city throughout the conflict, only to face the same destruction.
We were displaced before to the south. There were also martyrs there and bombardment. It is all the same. All displacement is for nothing. It is enough.
As the offensive intensifies, mourning and anger are mounting.
I want this message to reach the White House, the Americans who send their weapons to kill the children and women. Fear God in Gaza. We are tired from burying our loved ones every day. Where are you people? Arabs? Americans? Don't you have children? Our children are being killed and exterminated. We are being exterminated.
The Israeli military says tens of thousands of reservists have been called up to support the operation as troops push deeper into Gaza City.
US President Donald Trump has criticized India for purchasing large amounts of oil from Russia, calling the move very disappointing. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump confirmed his administration had imposed a 50% tariff on Indian goods in response. He voiced clear disapproval of New Delhi's energy ties with Moscow, but insisted the US and India still share a special relationship, despite what he called occasional moments of disagreement.
Unbelievable fine. I've been very disappointed that India would be buying so much oil, as you know, from Russia. And I let them know that. We put a very big tariff on India, 50% tariff, very high tariff.
And are you ready to reset relations with India at this point?
I always will. I'll always be friends with Modi. He's great. Prime Minister, he's great. I'll always be friends, but I just don't like what he's doing at this particular moment. But India and the United States have a special relationship. There's nothing to worry about. We just have moments on occasion.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv will continue striking back against Russian energy targets, even as neighbouring countries face fallout. Speaking after talks with Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico in Uzhhorod, Zelensky defended Ukraine's actions, stressing Russia has bombarded Ukrainian power facilities for years. Slovakia and Hungary are still reliant on Russian oil and gas and have seen disruptions in supplies through the Druzhba pipeline following recent Ukrainian attacks. Fico has criticized Ukraine's energy policies in the past, warning such strikes also hurt his country.
There is no alternative to peace, and we support it. This war has to end. Russia must stop the war, as they are the only party that started it and unfortunately continues to drag it out. We count on support for our peace efforts. Ukraine responds to Russia's attacks on our energy facilities and will keep doing so. But we really want this war to end. However, no one is going to just sit in the dark and tolerate it. We are open to joint projects in the energy sector and remain open to supplying Slovakia with oil and gas, unless, as I made clear to the Prime Minister, the gas and oil comes from Russia, because we are at war, period.
We respect how countries protect their national interests, but at the same time, we should also respect the interests of others. We discussed with Vladimir Putin the issue of attacks on oil infrastructure on the territory of the Russian Federation. We also discussed the fact that Russia is no longer able to transport energy to Slovakia. As you know, this has led to strong political statements on both sides. I have spoken about the losses incurred by Slovakia.
Once again, France's government faces a threat of collapse after Prime Minister François Bayrou announced that a no-confidence vote will be held during a session of the National Assembly on Monday, the 8th of September.
France is on the brink of a political crisis. Prime Minister François Bayrou has announced a confidence vote in the National Assembly on the 8th of September. If he fails, his government will be forced to resign. The vote comes after Bayrou unveiled an unpopular budget, including 43.8 billion euros in savings through cuts to public sector hiring, suspending pension indexation, scrapping 2 public holidays, and potentially higher taxes on high earners. Analysts say the move is a gamble to force opposition parties to negotiate, but it's unlikely to succeed.
So the Prime Minister called the confidence vote really is a gamble. So he has proposed a budget that is going to cut a great deal of money and also remove 2 public holidays. It's a very unpopular budget. And he knew that in proposing this budget, he was going to get a no confidence vote anyway. So his gamble was to essentially call a confidence vote so he could try to see if he could force the other actors in the opposition parties to negotiate with him.
President Macron has publicly expressed support for Bayrou, backing him through the confidence vote. However, Bayrou's centrist coalition lacks a parliamentary majority, forcing him to rely on opposition support or abstentions. But far-left Rebellious France, far-right National Rally, and other parties have pledged to oppose him. Rebellious France plans to file an impeachment motion against Macron on the 23rd of September, while National Rally and some centrist leaders demand the president's resignation or snap elections. The stakes are high. If Bayrou fails, his government will be forced to resign, leaving Macron to appoint a new prime minister for the 3rd time in a year and confront the reality of a fractured parliament. Analysts warn that even with a new premier, political gridlock is likely to continue. France faces a major debt challenge, with national debt at 114% of GDP and no budget surplus in over 50 years. Finance Minister Eric Lombard has cautioned that without controlling debt, interventions from the International Monetary Fund, rare for a developed country, could become necessary. Financial markets reacted quickly to Bayrou's announcement. Recently, interest rates on France's 10-year bonds rose to 3.5%, surpassing even debt-riddled Greece. Observers say this confidence vote is about more than just Bayrou's survival. It is about the future direction of France. The government's lack of a parliamentary majority means it must rely on opposition support or abstentions, which seems unlikely. Analysts predict a defeat could trigger further calls for legislative elections, but Macron may be cautious to take that step. As France approaches the 8th of September vote, uncertainty reigns. A deeply unpopular government, an unpopular budget, rising protests, and a president publicly supporting the embattled prime minister. The coming days could reshape the political landscape entirely.
Thousands of anti-government protesters gathered in northern Serbia, leading to clashes with riot police. Protesters joined a demonstration to demand elections. Police used tear gas and stun grenades to disperse the protesters in the area around the city's university campus. The protests began in response to a tragedy in November last year when 16 people were killed due to the collapse of a train station roof in Novi Sad. Demonstrators are blaming corruption for the disaster and are calling for those responsible to be held accountable. The European Union has fined Google nearly €3 billion over anti-competitive practices in digital advertising. The company now has 60 days to end the conduct or face tougher remedies.
The European Commission has imposed a €2.95 billion penalty on Google, accusing the company of abusing its dominance in the online advertising technology sector. Regulators say the conduct distorted Europe's digital advertising market since 2014, forcing publishers and advertisers to rely on Google's systems. Google now has 60 days to present a plan to end these practices, while regulators continue to weigh stronger remedies, including a potential breakup of some services. The tech giant has rejected the ruling, calling it unjustified, and announced plans to appeal. Executives warned the changes could hurt thousands of European businesses that depend on online advertising revenues. This is the fourth major antitrust case Google has faced in Brussels in under a decade, adding to previous multi-billion euro penalties. But the timing of the fine is politically sensitive. Brussels initially delayed the fine out of concern it could disrupt a fragile EU-US trade deal, which still faces hurdles over tariffs on European cars. In Washington, President Donald Trump denounced the decision, describing it as part of a broader campaign against American tech companies.
We're upset with the European Union because of what's happening with not just Google, but with all of our big companies. They just, hit them with these unbelievable fines, $17 billion and $14 billion. And they use that money to run Europe. It's almost become like common. It's almost become a yearly occurrence, like it's a tax.
He pointed to past actions against Apple and Google, claiming the fines amounted to tens of billions of dollars and signaled a broader pattern against US companies. Trump warned that Washington should respond in kind if European regulators continue this approach.
Turning to the region now. The delegations of Azerbaijan and Armenia conducted mutual visits on Friday to the territories of Azerbaijan and Armenia, led by Deputy Prime Ministers Shahin Mustafayev and Mehir Grigoryan. The talks were focused on coordinating efforts for broader delimitation and demining, as well as restoring and building necessary infrastructure. The sides also discussed timelines for implementation and exchanged views on organising the next meetings of their respective joint border commissions. Georgia's ruling party, Georgian Dream, led by Prime Minister Irakli Kobazhizadeh, has invited OSCE observers to monitor the 4th of October local elections. The government had argued earlier that inviting observers was unnecessary and would burden the mission. Kobazhizadeh said the decision came as two opposition parties nominated candidates in most districts, creating a competitive race. The move aims to ensure transparency and credibility, with the OSCE mission now expected to observe the vote. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaya Kallis in Qatar to discuss the latest developments regarding Iran's nuclear program and the ways to advance a diplomatic settlement.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi discussed bilateral relations and regional developments with the Emir of Qatar, Tamim Al-Thani, Tehran's nuclear program with the EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaya Kallas, as well as the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza with the Deputy Chairman of Political Bureau of the ruling Palestinian group Khalil al-Hayya, during a one-day visit to the neighboring Persian Gulf state of Qatar. According to the official Qatari news agency Qana, Araghchi conveyed the verbal message of the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian to Emir of Qatar on expansion of bilateral ties and issues of common concern, particularly the regional developments. Also, Iran's official IRNA news agency reported that Araghchi met with Kaya Kallas, during which the latest developments related to Iran's nuclear issue, especially the move by 3 European countries, France, Germany and the UK, to restore the repealed UN Security Council resolutions were discussed. Quoting a foreign ministry press release, the report said that Iran's top diplomat and the EU foreign policy chief further exchanged views on the interaction between Tehran and the International Atomic Energy Agency IAEA, which was suspended following the war on Iran's civilian nuclear sites last June. Local media quoted Iran's ambassador to the United Nations office in Vienna, Reza Najafi, saying that Tehran and IAEA held expert-level talks today discussing the new bilateral cooperation modality. During his stay in Doha, Araghchi also met with a high-ranking delegation of the Palestinian group Hamas, led by Khalil al-Hayya. According to the Press TV, affiliated to Iran's state IRIB broadcasting organization, the Iranian foreign minister reaffirmed Tehran's commitment to supporting the Palestinian people's legitimate resistance against Israeli occupation until their rights are fully restored. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for AnewZ TV, Tehran.
Staying on that topic, Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency are holding a new round of talks in Vienna. The aim is to define a revised framework for cooperation in the middle of growing international scrutiny of Tehran's nuclear program. To unpack this now and the new development, I'm joined by Faramaz Frabod, instructor of political science at Moravian University in Bethlehem. Welcome, Mr. Frabod.
Thank you for having me.
My first question is, what are the main objectives Iran seeks to achieve from these new talks with the IAEA?
It's a complicated story precisely because the IAEA, from perspective of Iran, was complicit in issuing a declaration or an announcement just on the eve of the attack that took place against Iran by Israel and then joined later on by United States. And it was a kind of declaration that was not based in fact, but gave a fig leaf for the attack against Iran. And secondarily, because Iran also claims that IAEA has used sensitive nuclear information from inside Iran and passed it to Israel for security reasons, and Israel has been able to perhaps assassinate or know the locations of senior nuclear scientists in Iran. So there's a very much a large amount of mistrust going on, and Iran's parliament had passed a law saying that IAEA would have to be suspended. That is, its activities in Iran must be suspended. So the negotiations that are now taking place are essentially walking a tight line in which Iran's government is trying to still be adhering to the parliamentary law that was passed, but also redefining a new modality, a new form of cooperation with IAEA that perhaps allows this activity between Iran and IAEA to take place in a way that addresses Iran's suspicions.
And how should Iran respond to concerns from Western powers over uranium enrichment and transparency?
That's another important question that you're asking. Thank you for asking that. And it's a very complicated question. I would even begin by saying that Iranian nuclear project is a peaceful nuclear project. We do not have any evidence since at least 2003 that Iran has moved towards weaponization. So from my perspective, the entire sanctioning regimes on Iran have been illegal, not to speak of ethics and morality. And now that Iran has been bombed, according to Trump administration, he says that it obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity. The Pentagon report came out and says maybe it's not full obliteration, but it is partial obliteration. And Iran's Araghchi, the foreign minister, earlier on said that it's under investigation whether or not the damages are extensive, but the expectation is that damages were extensive to Iran. So we are in a situation where Iran's activities are suspended. We don't know the extent of the damage. It's unlikely that there are any kind of nuclear activities taking place. And since these negotiations were about enrichment of uranium, it seems like it's irrelevant now, because if we accept the Western claim, Iran's nuclear activities are suspended and destroyed. So the question of that enriched uranium, 400 and maybe 10 kilograms to the level of 60%, maybe Iran had removed it before the bombing. So there are demands that maybe IAEA should have inspection abilities and see where they are. But that's a difficult question too, because why would Iran trust IAEA and say this is where it is, so that would be another location for bombing? So you can see how difficult these decisions are from the Iranian perspective.
Yes, and could the outcome of these talks influence then the future of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and Iran's broader relations with Europe and the US?
I am very suspicious of that, because I think that these negotiations are perhaps reproducing the earlier cycle of negotiations which led to the bomb. And it could be argued, I think, reasonably, that the faster Iran gets to these negotiations, the sooner the second phase of bombing on Iran might begin. And Iran actually might have an interest in delaying these negotiations, both to delay the possible second phase of the war, and also allowed it to have time to rebuild its defensive abilities in case a second war begins.
Do you think Iran is looking to make sure that it continues to keep up with its model of a nuclear program without much transparency from what they don't trust the IAEA in all of that?
I don't believe so, because Iran is aware that it's subjected to a double standard. There are countries like Israel, India, Pakistan that are not members of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but they're not treated by sanctions or war as Iran is. And secondarily, Iran, to the extent that made some secrecy about its nuclear program, was because it knew that the animosity of the West and Israel would always be against it and want to bomb it. So Iran kind of went underground in order to be able to have even its peaceful nuclear capacities. But going forward, I think that Iran wants to be transparent, and as the RDC wants to negotiate, but it doesn't want the negotiations to be another cover for a sneak attack against it and another phase of war and destruction.
And finally, in what way does the Iranian Parliament's new statute shape the direction of cooperation with the IAEA?
There's a nuance there. So, for instance, even though the parliament passed the law, IAEA was allowed to come in after the attack against Iran, and they inspected the fuel transformations of the Bushehr, refueling of Bushehr nuclear site. But the reason for that was because Bushehr is a Russian-built thing, and Russia has a stake in this, and of course, Iran doesn't want to alienate Russia and not allow these inspections for Bushehr. But for the other nuclear sites of Iran that were bombed, that's another thing. Iran probably would let that happen, but not without some form of agreed upon and guaranteed new modality of cooperation between IAEA and Iran that at least allows Iran to explain to its own public that we can trust the IAEA in this case and not see the next second phase of attack and tensions again.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening, Mr. Farbod. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev held a phone call with US President Donald Trump, focusing on trade, business cooperation and joint efforts against terrorism and extremism. Mirziyoyev invited Trump to pay an official visit to Tashkent at a convenient time. Both sides underlined upcoming meetings with US companies aimed at building long-term partnerships. The leaders also discussed regional cooperation in the C5+1 format and agreed to maintain high-level contacts to advance joint projects. In Afghanistan, powerful earthquakes and aftershocks have devastated the northeast of the country. More than 2,000 people are confirmed dead, thousands more injured, and survivors are left without homes or basic supplies. Aid agencies warn the response has been slow.
In the wake of a devastating earthquake, families in Afghanistan's northeastern Kunar province have lost their homes and possessions as two powerful aftershocks continued to shake the region. The two strong aftershocks struck eastern Afghanistan 12 hours apart, raising fears of further deaths and destruction. The region has already seen around 2,200 people killed, with rescuers battling mountainous terrain and harsh weather conditions.
The government brought us here because rocks are still falling and there are still earthquakes. The whole country is shaking. This morning there was another strong quake and rocks rolled down. We cannot spend our time there. We are forced to stay here because we have no house and cannot live in the rain. During this disaster, many people were martyred, and that night it rained on them. There were 65 bodies. We dug a trench and placed 45 of them inside. For the rest, we cleared out old graves and buried them there.
Entire households were buried under rubble, leaving survivors with little more than the clothes on their backs. Children are reported to be traumatized by the ongoing tremors.
We have no shelter, no tent, no mattress and no carpet. There is no water. People bring us hot water, but apart from that, there is nothing. We need cash assistance because all our belongings and property were buried under the rubble. We came from our area with only one set of clothes.
Don't even ask about the fear. If a car passes by here, the children get scared and start crying. I carry this one in my arms all day long. Even a slight shake makes them afraid.
The first quake, of magnitude 6, struck just before midnight on Sunday at a shallow depth of 10 kilometres. It caused widespread damage in Nangarhar and Kunar provinces. A second earthquake, magnitude 5.5, hit on Tuesday, causing landslides and blocking roads to remote villages, interrupting rescue operations. Survivors are struggling for basic necessities, while the United Nations and other agencies warn of a critical need for funds, food, medical supplies and shelter. The World Health Organization is seeking $4 million to respond. Turkish Red Crescent vehicles have been seen in Kunar, but overall aid response has been slow. The Taliban administration reported 2,205 deaths and 3,640 injuries as of Thursday, September 4th.
That's all the news we have for you from Baku. Stay tuned to AnewZ for more updates. Take care.